Okay, got my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is really just to prompt me on a couple of things. These are all reference, as Paul said, there's a thing called the internet which does all this. So we've got a link on our site which links across to the ODI lead site as well. Couple of things to mention, then I'll show you some data and maybe talk through some data. The first one is that given everything that's gone on, what the NHS usually does with well-meaning intent is it kind of, everyone goes inwards into their organisation and starts creating a load of work that's going on in every other organisation as well. And it's quite poorly joined up. And what you get layered on top of that is an industry where people have to send lots and lots of data off to the centre. And we talked on this call last week about a hashtag of get the data back or something like that, because the amount of data we collect, we're not really sure where it goes. It doesn't seem to be getting reflected well in ministers' questions. You sometimes get a Tableau dashboard, which NHSI or E might do, but fairly high level, doesn't really get you down into any sort of detail. And actually the data that we're creating would be very helpful if we pulled it locally. And in the NHS, they have these sort of regional things called STPs, and our one is Kent and Medway, and their geography is a really interesting thing. And there's a level at which it's about right. So Kent and Medway, for example, it's about right. It's different enough to London and Surrey and Sussex, and it's got a big enough population that you could do a good linked data set on. And we've got 4 acute trusts, 2 million people. So it feels about right to learn stuff. And to that end, on our site, we've put on a couple of things here. So we've got a link about the data spec that we think is useful, that actually might automate and drive all of the analysis that's going on. So instead of people, because at the moment we're just coming out of a situation where everyone was counting oxygen and ventilation in different ways, which is crazy. So we've agreed a spec which is on this site, which links across to Paul's, which says here's a row level pseudonymized patient level data set that you can all put together, and if other people around the country want to use it, that would be really good. So that is there as a resource. What we've also put on the site is a link here on at a higher level. There's a PDF on here which explains how we're going to build a linked data set for the region. And we were sort of doing this anyway, but COVID has made it much more interesting. Sort of user case at the moment that I'm talking to people about is intimate partner violence, or IPV. And there's some growing data which you're sort of seeing on some of the Sunday papers about people being in lockdown and domestic abuse kind of spiraling. And the data is quite thin, to be honest. It's kind of numbers of calls going into refuge and people like that, but it's really important. And my personal politics are such that we should link our data together, which is where Open Data Saves Lives started, from a thing called Data Saves Lives, which is you take the premise that you have a social contract with the NHS that allows your data to be used for good things, which I'm comfortable with. So there's a couple of resources on there. I'll just show you a couple of things we're doing also locally. So this is real data, so kind of treat this sensitively. So this is a mobile dashboard we've put out in our trust. We're looking at linking this to other organisations as well, just showing you kind of how many COVID cases. These are three of our main sites: Canterbury, Margate and Ashford. Total number of cases. We've done a lot of work working out how to count oxygen. We've done a lot of work looking at ITU capacity, ventilated ITU capacity, and so on. And if this draws here, what we've also done is bring that up into things like Power BI. So you start to see some aggregate level data of COVID cases. So what Sarah will speak about next week is that the imperial model would shoot off the top of this screen before coming back. But we've got some pretty good data locally now, which is showing that the curves are starting to flatten here. And we're now into, and this is another really good example of why wouldn't you share all this data? Trusts are just starting to think about how are we going to plan for all of this coming back together. How are we going to get all the elective work re-going? How are we going to get the non-urgent cancer treatment back in? And these are going to be huge modeling exercises, and it's going to be so much better if everyone kind of shares their approach and a data set. So we're going to try and kind of lead a little bit locally, do some regional work, and be a kind of an exemplar on how to model, how to get the theatres humming again, how to get outpatients opened up, because it won't simply be lockdown finishes and then everyone's back to normal. It's going to take a long time to put this back together and think about how we model it. And all those resources don't suddenly become available in the same way that they were before, because we've redeployed all our junior doctors to go and help in different areas. All the leave patterns have gone out the window. So it's going to take some quite significant modelling, and it would be such a shame if that was done 150 times around the country and not shared in any way. We've got a whole load of stuff on here, which I can share kind of examples of. The next big thing for us is working out swabbing, how many people were swabbing, which is here. A lot of people starting to worry about oxygen flow. We think we're okay down in Kent for now. This is our oxygen capacity, so we look kind of well within that for different types of oxygen at the moment. But at different levels, we're doing kind of different analyses. So you'll hear in the sort of press, a lot of the conversation is about ITU capacity and invasive ventilation capacity. But the data we're seeing locally, and it's early and rough, and I'm kind of sharing it here anecdotally between friends, is that quite a small proportion of patients make it to ITU. So we've got a vast proportion of our patients are dying on wards. So these are patients that are kind of have reached a ceiling of care, have got multiple comorbidities, are very elderly, are male. So we're seeing higher death rates in males than females. Encouragingly now, for those that come to hospital, we're seeing higher numbers of people discharged than die. So in that sort of first week or two, those odds were about 50%, but encouragingly, we're now seeing higher numbers of people start to discharge. But the reason I'm quite passionate about sort of joining these calls is because the way the data is getting reported nationally is very clunky. And another thing I think I mentioned, which I'll hope to have some results for you very soon, is a comparison of the number of people who died with COVID and who died because of COVID. We've got some early data on that. The numbers are relatively small because nicely, the numbers of deaths are relatively small. They're smaller than we thought they would be at this point, but that isn't getting reported. There's some kind of early commentary on the BBC about this, which is really good, but a lot of very general commentary about how everything's counted differently in different ways. So I think there's some quite nice intelligence coming out. There's something we were looking at this morning. There's an app which shows some people have agreed to take part in the use of an app which tracks their movement. And it shows that as COVID broke out, you can, in theory, say Leeds was really compliant, whereas people in Margate, were on the beach because the sun came out. And there's some early data around that. But it's the usual thing of kind of hidden behind an NHS firewall, which I think is quite frustrating. So I'm kind of using this period, which I don't think will be too short. I think this kind of relaxation, if that's the right word, of some of the information governance around this, I think will continue into next calendar year in a positive way. And it will allow us to share data much more openly. I'll stop there, Paul, because you've got quite a packed agenda, but I'm happy to share any of this. Links to it, screen grabs, slides, whatever people need.
Great. And then just to finish off, and then there might be some questions as well, is and we'll take them as we go along, and then maybe sweep up at the end as well. The way you built your dashboards, the code, how are you working with that now? Is the data and the code open, or how is that working? Or how would somebody working for another part of the NHS either talk to you about deploying this, work with you, share their version and improving it? How would that work?
Yeah, just get in touch. It's all standard technology. So the if I'm still sharing this type of thing is just a SQL database behind which we could share the spec for, and a .NET website. I put Power BI up just because a lot of people are using Power BI. It's not an open source technology, but we'd happily share the code we've used to write it. But it was more putting up there as kind of display, so that if people wanted to pick up an open source dashboarding engine, it was really there just to give advice on, colors and layout and that type of thing. So anyone who wants to use any of this, just get in touch and we'll share how we've done it.